Hey, good evening, everyone. We will go ahead and get started. My name is Valerie Bird Fort, and I'm an instructor at the University of South Carolina. And I'm part of the Get Ready, Stay Ready Community Action Toolkit team. I'm pleased to welcome Tom Flatting, who will lead us in a series on crisis and reputation management for school and public librarians. Flatting serves as managing partner for Hennis Communications, which is a team of award-winning journalists highly experienced in public relations and reputation enhancement. This crisis communications training series will help you and your library team develop strategies for responding to any crisis, big or small, making sure you arrive on the other side with your reputation preserved and even enhanced. All of these sessions will be recorded and housed on the Get Ready, Stay Ready webpage. In fact, you can find last week's session titled Preparing for the Worst on that site now. This evening, we will have a short session about social media best practices for public employees, and then there will be time for a question and answer session. The presentation will be recorded, and because the questions last week were so very valuable, we will be recording the Q&A as well. But note that I'll read your questions from chat, and the chat is not going to be included in the recording, so please feel comfortable being open about your questions. And now I'll turn it over to our speaker, Tom Flatting. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Valerie. Let's get this PowerPoint going here. This is from a policy manual from a public school that I recently worked with. It's under their social media use heading, and whoever wrote it could not have been more accurate, in my opinion. Although with the way things are going, I might change it to will have unintended consequences. Especially if, say, you decide to post something like this to your Twitter account. Now, helpfully, Danielle Ford, who definitely wants her colleague, Katie Williams, to be quiet, put Clark County School Board in her Twitter handle, just in case anyone didn't know. By the way, Danielle removed this shortly after she posted it. It took me about 90 seconds on a recent search to find it. And it's another object lesson in one of the principles of social media that people forget all the time. If you post something on social media, you should assume it will never go away. Now, let me emphasize this, though. I'm not saying don't use social media. At this point in 2023, I don't think you have a choice. And certainly your libraries don't have a choice. 7 in 10 Americans say they use social media, a share that's remained stable over the past 5 years, according to 2021 Pew Institute research. And compare that with 2005, when only 1 in 20 adults use social media. So social media, it's not news, and I don't need to tell you, is a large part of people's daily lives. Public libraries across the nation, as you know better than me, have embraced social media. And when you need to reach people immediately who care about your library and want to know what's going on, say in a crisis, social media is both immediate and effective. As Valerie said, I'm Tom Flatting. I'm managing partner of Hennis Communications in Cleveland. I specialize now in helping people figure out what to say, when to say it, and who to say it to in high stress situations. For 33 years before I joined Hennis, about 7 years ago, I was in communications in a different way. I was a newspaper reporter and editor. Most recently, I was managing editor of the Plain Dealer in Cleveland. I was also managing editor of the Detroit Free Press and the Akron Beacon Journal in Akron, Ohio. And I was editor of the St. Paul Pioneer Press in Minnesota. And I was a reporter, including in Columbia, South Carolina, at the state where Valerie is now. One of the things I found is that running newsrooms is not all that different from doing crisis communications on a daily basis. And increasingly, the people who are running public libraries are also running into crises. I also learned, especially over the last 10 years or so of that newspaper career, about the power of social media. So I'm going to argue tonight that, as tempting as it may sound, you can't avoid social media. And I think as organizations that react with the public on a daily, really almost constant basis, you have to use social media and use it well. And you should want to use social media because many, if not most of the people you care the most about, the people who use and love public libraries and the people you want to communicate with about the value of public libraries are on social media, and they're on it a lot. But there are best practices to continue and follow. Messages on social media from the library or library representatives must be consistent with how you talk about your libraries in other publications, in public forums, everywhere. And communications on social media should reflect your library's value and mission, just as with all your other communications. I also believe that everyone on social media, especially public libraries and individuals who represent public libraries, should establish terms of use for all their accounts. These are rules of engagement for all visitors to your sites, especially if those sites like Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram allow comments where, as we all know, users may become uncivil, harassing, threatening, etc. For example, on your library website, tell people how you expect them to act on your social media pages. Say you don't allow personal attacks, profanity, racism, sexism. Say you don't allow copyrighted material to be posted in your comments. Put a link to that policy in relevant areas on your social media channels, such as the About section on Facebook. You have rules for how people should act when they're in your libraries, and you've had those rules for decades. Have rules for behavior on your social media pages as well. Now, I realize this can get more than a little tricky for public libraries or any public entity subject to the First Amendment and public information requests. Social media comments and the question of whether public bodies and elected officials can delete them or block social media users is one of the most slippery legal slopes. So we always, and I'll underscore that, always recommend that the public entities we work with, schools, libraries, cities, counties, townships, municipalities, whatever, all of them, confer with a trusted attorney when drafting a social media terms of use, and especially when contemplating what to do with problematic comments. So that you can get a better feel for this, I'm going to be sending a kind of a generic social media terms of use that we've created for public libraries that you can tailor to their own use. This has been blessed by an attorney that I work with. That doesn't mean I would say just grab it and use it. Confer with your attorney as well. But it'll be up there and it'll be in the Get Ready, Stay Ready toolkit certainly later this week. So there's no one size fits all answer to this question. And these are common questions. Can I delete comments? Can I ban a crazy pain in the butt commenter? No one size fits all answer, and the stakes can be high. For example, a Florida state representative recently banned a Twitter follower and sparked a 3-year lawsuit and $185,000 in legal fees. But that doesn't mean you have to sit back and act as a target for social media haters. This is one of my favorite examples of a public library social media policy, and I know it's hard to read on this screen. I'm not even asking you to do that, and I'm not going to attempt to. It's from the Traverse Area District Library in Michigan. You can find it very easily online. It's well thought out, it's detailed, it's expansive. And this public library in Michigan makes clear that it will consider taking down comments and even banning commenters who keep violating its terms of use. This is part of the Traverse Library's social media policy. And I'll particularly point to the first and third bullets that make clear we reserve the right to delete comments that violate the policy. We reserve the right to block or otherwise ban anyone from posting for behavior that the library director or his or her designee determined violates the policy. It can be done. It just has to be done carefully. Finally, though, after conferring with your attorney, if you do choose to remove a comment from a communication standpoint, we don't recommend just removing it, because we can virtually guarantee the commenter will then either repost on your site usually under a different ISP, get on a different computer and repost it, sometimes with a different name, or post it on their own social media pages and try to make an issue that you're now censoring free speech. In your comments instead, if you choose to enforce a policy like this and you remove a comment, in those comments, say you removed it and say why, because it violated your rules and link to that terms of use. Over time, we have seen these social media guidelines, when done well and consistently applied, result in more civil social media spaces. We also think that public employees like yourselves, who want to both talk about their jobs and organizations on social media while also maintaining personal or private accounts, should consider establishing a professional account related to their library duties, separate from any personal or private accounts, and drawing a very bright line between the professional and the personal. If you do decide to go this route of professional and personal pages, consider these tips and guidelines. If you maintain multiple accounts, make sure you distinguish between the accounts. Don't let them blur or overlap. When you're on your personal pages, make it personal. Don't talk about your library-related work there. And absolutely make sure you understand how your privacy settings work and that you have them set at a level that makes you comfortable with what everyone else can see about you. And then, of course, there are the don'ts. Don't write posts on personal accounts that would fit within the scope of your employment as a public library employee. Again, keep your personal pages personal. Don't discuss your private accounts in public meetings or documents. Don't link to your private accounts from an official library account or any public account. Don't use government-issued devices such as cell phones to maintain a private account. Among the risks you're taking, if you use your personal accounts to discuss public business, is in effect making your private Facebook page a public record. And I don't know anyone who would welcome their private social media pages being subject to a public records request and search. Sarah Clark is the in-house attorney for the Ohio School Boards Association. I've worked closely with her, and she notes that yes, it's possible that a private social media account of a public employee could be subject to a public records request. The deciding factor is not what your job is. It's not that this was your private Facebook page. It's whether the message posted there, and I'll quote Sarah now, serves to document the organization, functions, policies, decisions, procedures, operations, or other activities of the public office, or in this case, the public library. It's the content of the message, not whether the message is posted on a public or private account, that drives the public record analysis. We'd also suggest that all public library employees adopt a practice across your organizations for what to do if a public library employee receives comments on a private social media page about the library. The simplest, clearest policy is to forward any library-related comments from a private social media page to a point person, a designated person for the library. Then on your private page, respond by thanking the commenter, say you forwarded the concerns to the appropriate person at the library, and don't comment further. Another very real threat in today's digital era of communications is having your social media accounts hacked by a malicious actor, someone who may want to do you harm. Even Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, has had his social media accounts hacked multiple times, in fact. So if it can happen to him, it can certainly happen to you if you're not taking necessary precautions. And the fact that you work for a public library may make you a target for such a social media hack. Here are some simple tips to help prevent your social media accounts from being hijacked. You can easily look up how to use multi-factor authentication if you don't already know and if you don't already use it. That helps you gain access to any of your social media accounts in a safe way. Basically means you have to provide 2 or more pieces of evidence to verify your identity before logging into one of your social media accounts. If you don't already have it, I'd strongly suggest you get it. We've all heard the stuff about passwords until we're tired of hearing it, but I'm going to repeat it because people keep making this mistake. Effective passwords for your social media accounts have a mix of uppercase and lowercase letters, numbers, and special characters. Effective passwords do not use widely available personal information, such as the names of your spouse or kids or dog. Despite all this, most commonly used password in 2021 was the most recent data I could find. Most commonly used password in 2021 was 123456, followed closely in second by 1234567889. And anybody want to take a shot at the 4th most used password? It was password. And I join all of you in weeping for our collective intelligence. Hey, you know those fun quizzes on Facebook, like list your 10 favorite concerts of all time, or your first 10 jobs, or 25 random things about me? Don't do them. Any information you post on social media can also be used by a hacker as they craft what's called a social engineering attack. Armed with that personal information that you shared through that fun quiz, an attacker is well equipped to customize a message for you that looks legitimate. Attackers drive users to phishing pages and malware that can allow a hacker to gain access to your social media and email accounts and potentially sensitive information. That message is a lot more effective if it's coming from a fake account impersonating someone you know, or better yet, the real account after a connection of yours after it's been hijacked. For an attacker, those are both added benefits. Avoid logging into accounts from public Wi-Fi. Why? Because it's much easier to hack accounts from there. So after all that scary stuff, why should libraries use social media? You have to. Too many people care about you and are on social media and expect you to be too. And finally, there's this. It's effective and we need you. The Urban Libraries Council said this in its leadership brief, libraries leading civic engagement. In an environment of decaying trust in public institutions, libraries remain a trusted and respected public resource, which makes them ideal civic engagement leaders. You can lead on social media, which is frequently and I think accurately called today's virtual town square as well. That's it. All right. I'm happy to take your questions, turn this into more of a conversation. I'm going to stop screen sharing. These slides and the slides from my previous presentation, by the way, also will be uploaded soon to the Get Ready, Stay Ready toolkit.
Thank you so much. Very valuable information. And I agree with you so much that libraries need to be on social media, whether it's public libraries or school libraries. I'm a huge advocate of school librarians being on social media because I think for school librarians in particular, it's a great way for the community to know what a school librarian is doing. I think a lot of times we know what the public librarians and what the public library is doing, just kind of in service to the public. But for those school librarians, I think it's really critical so that administrators and the community knows what's going on in that school library. But social media, I think, is very important as a marketing tool and as just an outreach tool. So what questions do you all have? As I said, we're going to keep recording because last week our questions, we had so many great ones, and I do want to be able to capture those questions and answers. So I do see that we have one. So sometimes it is hard to know the line between making a statement and defending ourselves. Do you have a suggestion?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, because you don't really want to come off as defensive. I mean, one thing you can always depend on is when you're talking about yourself, lean on those your values that you've probably established, probably on your website and or your mission statement. In most situations, particularly a crisis or a potential crisis, we tell people to consider those. I mean, that's why you do them. They come in most in handy. They are most effective in those situations. And if you're repeating those, you're stating those, it's a statement of fact and it's a statement of value by the library rather than being defensive about that particular situation. And in many cases, I'm betting that your value statements and your mission statement will apply to a lot of different situations. So that's one. The other one just is, ask yourself how, practice responding to it before you write something. Take a colleague, grab a colleague and sit them down and say, hey, how do you think this sounds? How would you react to it naturally? Because the other thing you want to try to do is always humanize yourselves. You're one of the problems we run into, and it happens a lot on social media. We're going to talk at next week's session about threat assessment on social media and how to know when to respond and how to effectively respond. But one way is to get it off of social media and talk to each other like a couple of human beings. And so the more you can humanize your communication, so you're not some faceless, soulless building, you're a person who's trying to do good and running that library.
I apologize for my dogs, but please continue posting questions in the chat. So another question, I recently listened to another video regarding the subject. The presenter strongly recommended not enabling comments at all, although I am not yet finding this as an available option on Facebook. Do you agree with that recommendation?
Yeah, there's a lot of attorneys that'll say that too, that really the fail safe here is just don't allow comments, period. I'll tell you this, 3 or 4 years ago, I would have said that that's a non-starter because social media is so built on social exchanges. This is how these things evolve, right? Social media, frankly, has gotten so toxic that I can see where that's a reasonable expectation. I think you have to base it though partly on your community and your community's expectations. Is your community of a kind that may resent not allowing comments or may somehow consider that you're not participating in the community? And that's a hard thing to measure, but you're in your communities. I mean, libraries are very much a part of their communities. So I would assess that. But I will tell you that where 3 years ago I said, don't even consider that, I'd say, yeah, consider it. But then once you do that, you're all in. Because then you will get sued and you will lose if you situationally allow comments or take them down. You're either all in or you're all out. Every attorney I've ever worked with has told me that. The only bad thing about taking down comments, though, is as toxic as social media can be, we've also all experienced where it can be a wonderfully rich place where people share information and share stories and a powerful driver of information. And we've seen in a crisis where when an institution is under attack or an organization is under attack, there are allies and supporters who will organically arise to defend them. And if they don't have that social media outlet, they can't do that.
And someone commented to that, I think you just have to make a post and then edit the comments after your content is posted. So on Facebook, if you wanted to not allow that comments feature, that's how you would do that. You would make the post and then edit it to not allow comments. But I agree with you that then if you don't allow comments ever, then your social media presence is marketing solely, right? Like then it's just like information. And just the way social media works, as far as my understanding goes, your views will go down and people aren't going to see what you are posting anyway if you don't allow for those comments, right?
There's no doubt your traffic will go down. It'll go down substantially.
So it is all good information to think about in terms of what you want your page to be, how kind of popular you want it to be, I guess. It's all good information to think about. What other questions do you all have? We will stick around for a couple of more minutes to allow more comments to be posted in the chat. Can you share more about why you believe that library district social media policy is effective?
Yeah, the Traverse City Area District Library. It is, when you get into it, if you try, it's very easy to find online. If you just search for Traverse Area District Library social media policy. But it is really extensive. It is very well thought out. They clearly have used legal and followed legal advice in crafting it. It anticipates, what I like about it is it anticipates a lot of what's going on these days to public libraries and in social media. And within that policy addresses it at the forefront. And as I said, it's very, very detailed. And, you know, I mean, I do like the fact that they are saying, you violate this policy, you're subject to having your comment taken down. And if you keep violating it, you're subject to being blocked. Now, they clearly got an attorney's blessing for that because there have been lawsuits filed over that when public entities do it, but they have done it and they've successfully done it. So it can be done. And I would bet you, now I have not, so don't hold me this, I have not looked at this, but I would bet you that their social media sites are a more civil place as a result of that policy.
Do you know, this might not be related, but with that social media policy, if someone is commenting, and so it's a public library patron and they have been removed from having the ability to post on the social media pages, does that also then apply to like their in-person services that they're allowed to receive from the public library? Do you know?
You know, I don't know. That's a really interesting question, Valerie. I don't know. I wouldn't think it would, but I don't know.
Mm-hmm. And I guess too, that would be two different situations. So
it's two different situations.
How
yeah.
a patron acts online, kind of that keyboard warrior kind of thing, right?
Exactly.
Is going to be completely different than perhaps how they are when they come into the public library. And a lot of times somebody who is commenting on something on social media, they may not even be someone who lives in your community, right?
Right. Oh, a lot of times, a lot of times. That's part of the frustration of social media is that it can be coming from everywhere. And in many cases, there are people who don't live anywhere near you, don't use your services, and don't actually really care about you. They just think it's fun to do that on social media. So that's part of effective threat assessment, is trying to determine that. I will also say this, that you know, I believe strongly in best practices and in looking at peers to find things. So that Traverse policy just jumped out at me, and I like to share it with other, because it's a library that put it in place and is using it.
Well, I'm not seeing any other questions now. If anything else comes up, please feel free to contact me, or I guess contact me, and then I'll share it with Tom. And then we've got 2 more sessions coming up in May. Every Monday in May, we've got these sessions happening. So the next week, same time, our session is telling your story to the people who matter most, communicating to stakeholders amid a crisis. So if any questions come up, again, feel free to reach out. We can definitely start the next session with any kind of questions that have come up, but then please do join us next week. I hope that you all have a wonderful evening, and this recording will be posted very soon on the Get Ready, Stay Ready website. So thank you so much, everyone, and thank you, Tom.
Thank you all for taking the time. See you next week.